for driving business.
We'll be back from the break. You're still watching Smart Means Business, and before we actually head into our developing story for the moment, we are just reminding you to grow your investments with the Zabo platform. Zabo is a platform that is definitely making it better for you to invest and grow your investments. And obviously it is as much as you can definitely get with the platform, and you can easily kickstart off your investment today with the Zabo platform. Register with your national identification number, and then you will be good to go. Zabo, my money, my future. All Tech East Africa, do something new. And well, of course, speaking of our developing story, today, the 3rd of May 2023, or the 3rd of May annually, is celebrated as the World Press Freedom Day. A big discussions around the freedom the press normally have, and not only that, the conditions under which most of them work. In Africa, the press continue to fight for their rights, especially when they're actually covering, for example, riots, demonstrations. The way they are handled by the security personnel is something that is definitely up for discussion, not only in Uganda, but in Africa, all over. So the press will be, the Ugandan journalists will be joining the rest of the world in commemorating the World Press Day, the World Press Freedom Day of 2023. And of course, this is by UNESCO as well. That is a department under the United Nations organization. So briefly, when you look at it, the hashtag is World Press Freedom Day. Where is that freedom coming from? Are the journalists getting that freedom though? And of course, you want to understand what really comes in from the same kind of discussions as we go deeper in understanding. But of course, on Saturday, the UN Secretary General had this to say in regards to the impact of journalism and the press in the world, or what you could call the fourth estate.
For 3 decades, on World Press Freedom Day, the international community has celebrated the work of journalists and media workers. This day highlights a basic truth. All our freedom depends on press freedom. Freedom of the press is the foundation of democracy and justice. It gives all of us the facts we need to shape opinions and speak truth to power. And as this year's theme reminds us, press freedom represents the very lifeblood of human rights. But in every corner of the world, freedom of the press is under attack. Truth is threatened by disinformation and hate speech seeking to blur the lines between fact and fiction, between science and conspiracy. The increased concentration of the media industry into the hands of a few, the financial collapse of scores of independent news organizations, and an increase of national laws and regulations that stifle journalists are further expanding censorship and threatening freedom of expression. Meanwhile, journalists and media workers are directly targeted on and offline as they carry out their vital work. They are routinely harassed, intimidated, detained, and imprisoned. At least 67 media workers were killed in 2022. An unbelievable 50% increase over the previous year. Nearly 3/4 of women journalists have experienced violence online, and 1 in 4 have been threatened physically. 10 years ago, the United Nations established a plan of action on the safety of journalists to protect media workers and then the impunity for crimes committed against them. On this and every World Press Freedom Day, the world must speak with one voice. Stop the threats and attacks. Stop detaining and imprisoning journalists for doing their jobs. Stop the lies and disinformation. Stop targeting truth and truth tellers. As journalists stand up for truth, the world stands up with them.
And well, of course, that is the UN Secretary General giving us all those and more of what we do expect. Andrew, your take in a minute regarding the nature under which journalists do work in Uganda, for example.
Actually, even looking at Africa at large, you know, one thing I always believe is journalism it's a calling, first of all, away from being a profession. And in most cases, if you say it's a calling, that means there is a particular purpose it is attached to, and the purpose comes with solving problems in society. Now, in Africa, that's the challenge, because the only impact we can say that, you know, that, okay, how we can feel that journalists have been of great importance to the continent is the impact of they have put. Probably, for example, we see that now issues affecting Africans like corruption due to that excessive exposure are now no longer felt. But the challenge comes in that journalists are suppressed in a way by, you know, the different governments, I'll say that, whereby they're intimidated, you know, threats, and that limits the possibility. For example, we've seen investigative journalists facing it rough, you know, so many times because they're exposing things which are kind of, you know, which some parties don't want them out. Just like in the Western world, journalism has impact. But the challenge in Africa, there is less impact because of the suppression. That even if I feel like I need to do something about this, and I see that people are suffering because of this, but because of the intimidation, I'm kind of limited, and I'm not going to be effective. And at the end of the day, it's going to sound cliche. You know, this thing whereby you go report something, but you're like, but these are the things we talk about, but nothing changes. And I wonder if a journalist doesn't really, if you don't ask yourself such a question, that we are doing all this, but why, how come we've exposed these people, we've talked about this, but how come nothing is changing? Then I don't think that person yet has a mind of a journalist. At some point, it should frustrate you. That's why I say it's a calling. It's not just a profession.
Very true.
And prestige to feel, you know, some people use it for that. But I believe if such challenges are addressed, probably journalists, intimidations should really not be the way forward. That's if we are to have impact to the community, as, you know, to be of great benefit, to fulfill the purpose of our calling.
And well, of course, the Ugandan journalists do join the rest of the world to commemorate the World Press Freedom Day. And to the entire journalists in the country, the journalism fraternity, rather, we do wish you all well today. And besides that, now let's turn our eyes to sports business this morning.